What's up, guys and gals of the movement world? It's Sean Mishka, the Movement Miyagi, coming to you once again on behalf of Football Beyond the Stats and our Movement Play of the Week. This week for week 17 of the 2023 National Football League season. And we've made it to the end of the road on yet another NFL season, as next week, on week 18, I'll be taking a dive into our all movement team, our movement awards, and ultimately culminating in our Mover of the Year, our 11th annual Mover of the Year. So this will be our last movement play of the week where we dive into the skilled movement behavior of the week's best. And as I've talked about before, this isn't about just recognizing the individuals with the highest output or stats. It isn't about recognizing those that are the names, but instead it's about really diving into the nuances that let lead to the emergence and the channeling of this type of movement behavior that is awfully dexterous, with a player finding a functional fit between themselves and the disposition of the problem, in themselves in their emerging movement solution, their perceptions, their cognitions, in their actions. And today, like so many times here at our Movement Play of the Week, we have another one of those examples from a player that I will admit I have not seen a whole heck of a lot of, and I might even venture the guess I've never seen play, at least diving in deep as we will today. So, Lil'Jordan Humphrey, wide receiver from the Denver Broncos, going to give him some flowers here today in our last movement play of the week against the Chargers in Denver this previous Sunday. So let's look at Little Jordan Humphrey, do his thing, put a bunch of Chargers in the blender and on his poster here en route to scoring and busting out this tie game on Sunday on New Year's Eve, excuse me. We're going to dive into this a number of different times as we typically do. I want to really highlight how creative, how adaptable, but also how novel the nuances of this movement solution so happen to be. Let's go ahead and dive into it or look at it one more time through here. And before we really go step by step, local movement problem by local movement problem. And again, like on any other week, we want to get into what this might mean for our practice and learning environment design as well. So, three times through at full speed ought to be enough. If you guys want to check that out again, you can certainly do so. If you, like me, aren't familiar with Lil'Jordan Humphrey and who he is and what he brings to the table, you're probably not going to be in the minority. You're probably going to be someone who this is the first time you see him. He only has 13 catches for 162 yards on the entire season, but three of those 13 have gone to pay dirt just like this one does. And we're talking about a guy right here who, in his fifth season, has bounced around to three different teams. Undrafted free agent coming in, playing for the Saints and then the Patriots, mostly a special teams guy from everything I can gather and tell, a new Bronco this year in 2023. And of course, on any given team, when you're an undrafted free agent, and unless you come in and you really fill a niche, you're going to have to work and grind and kind of stay on that hustle to get your opportunities. But when those opportunities arise, doesn't matter who you are, you have the opportunity to seize and show the rest of the National Football League, particularly down the stretch of the season, what your skill is really capable of. So even on a team that has a Jerry Jeudy and a Cortland Sutton and the like, I believe that the Broncos are sort of looking at what's ahead, and that would obviously be indicated last week when they benched Russell Wilson and effectively ending his time in Denver, right? So fifth year guy, first year at the Denver Broncos, and this is his third team in that time. We're also talking about a guy who's 6'4" and 225-ish pounds. So we're talking about a big cat, especially to move like this. So let's kind of pick up here with Humphrey on the crossing route, 3rd and 8 in Denver, obviously altitude being high, those things change the constraints that we're working with. The grass at Denver, the field and the ambiance, the aura, if you will, of the stadium, all being constraints that are coalescing at this particular time. The Broncos are still in contention at this moment, but the Chargers are not, with one or now two games left to go at this time, but one game left after this week. So though it's a little blurry as this ball approaches Humphrey, I want you guys again, as we try to tell the movement problem solving story for any player, including Humphrey on this respective week, let's again try to think to ourselves what we can do when we look and analyze as to why or how a respective player is able to solve any emerging movement problem. And as these changing situations, local movement problem by local movement problem, may lead to what we would have to do or what we'd look to do in a practice and learning environment to manipulate constraints to set alive movement problems for players to solve, and how we might be able to educate the players' attention and intentions. We're going to talk a little bit about that here today. So we pick up with Humphrey at the 40-yard line after the crossing route from Stidham. And I want you to look right there when he catches the ball and begins to look over his shoulder. Of course, many players, especially those that would be of lesser experience or have had less exposure to certain movement problems, are typically going to kind of be in a rush to get where they're going. We've talked about this before. But with Humphrey, we see a certain maturity and patience once the ball gets in his hand. And we also see an awfully sensitive and attuned perceptual information pickup. We see that right here, right now, even at this moment, when we look at what he might be looking at. And that, of course, would be opponents, or then, as we're about to find out, teammates and changing opponents, right? And we're going to see these two converging paths and how informative they might be to what it is that Humphrey is about to do. But you have to also realize his local intentions, his intentional aims to act in a given way at this very moment would also relate to that which what he knows he just had to beat in order to get open. And that would, of course, be the defender that is trailing him. So even though he is going to be looking to this dude right here, because again, behavior affords behavior, the opponent's behaviors are going to inform one as to how they could act. And we should educate their attention in this way, meaning what information they're looking to and through. What we find is when we see Humphrey moving at this sort of ownership speed, the movement problems aren't coming to him too quickly. He's able to then coordinate, control, and organize a movement solution that is more adaptable. It's more emergent and it's more taking place with the what is. It's finding a functional fit with that what is, his movement solution, that is. So we got this dude right here, his trailer, as well as then this guy coming in space. This should begin to inform us as to if we're a coach or a skill acquisition specialist, what types of movement problems we might be able to set in practice and learning environments, whether we're talking about high school players, college players, or NFL players. This type of problem is one that myself and my colleague Blake would set up really frequently for both offensive and defensive players. And that would probably be without this dyadic relationship of Judy and this other defender down in the bottom. So right off the bat, we can see what we might do. We might have a movement problem, and usually this would probably be down at the sideline. That would be, let's see if I could say something like this, and the other one would be off screen. I don't know if you can see that behind my picture here. So I'm going to just draw this out just so those of you who do want to kind of use this to inform us as to what types of movement problems and workspaces we could be operating in and with. We will often put players from the hash to the sideline, so working at that type of width, within a 15 to probably 20 or 25-yard length. And then, of course, repetition to repetition, we're going to inject repetition without repetition, meaning we're constantly going to be manipulating and changing the constraints. So we might have a one, and let me get my star back out, or probably something else. Let's heart them. So we got Humphrey there with a heart. We got this defender here with a heart. We got this defender back here with a heart. So we would do a 1v2 in space, and we would let the offensive skill player catch this ball in any number of ways. So they would enter this space maybe from this corner with a chaser coming from behind, and this defender entering the space probably from about there. But then again, we would change it rep to rep. So this defender right here, let me erase that if I could, might be coming straight down the pipe here, down that tunnel, and this offensive player we might have into the space straight at him with a chaser like this guy coming and entering the space from behind him. So this offensive skill player has to have a certain sense of urgency, but what we're trying to do is expose them to these slices or snippets of the game that might unfold like this. Okay. I digress. Hopefully, some of that makes some sense, and it's not that different from that which what we've highlighted before. But look at the education of attention here. Okay. Attention. What information is he picking up, which blends into, feeds into his education of intention, his aims to act in a given way. And we might tell both the offensive skill player as well as the defensive one differing intentions. With the offensive skill player, we could be look to become sensitive to both bodies within the space. And they would have an opportunity to search and explore that space. Might tell them, look to be deceptive here, or look to exploit the space, just nudging their local intentions ever so slightly in the moment before they would enter this space. Now, what we find from, and that's why I kind of premise it here, what we find from Lil'Jordan Humphrey is look at how he is not in a rush at this moment. Let me go back. So you can kind of see what I'm talking about here. I want you to look and see how, and now granted, we're working at 50% speed here, but once he catches the ball, once he picks up the angle, the speed, the mannerisms, the behaviors and kinematics of this defender, and he sees this guy closing this space, he knows that that guy's going to occupy what would be this gap, right? So Humphrey himself, at the drop of a hat and in a moment's notice, in a very attuned as well as intentional way, watch him change his tempo, his speed, his pace, his behaviors, and see what it does to the behaviors of this guy. It slows him down. It begins to open up an opportunity to act where, let me get my arrow back out if I could. Sorry for the delay. Where hopefully there will be an opportunity to act here or back there. Okay, so to the right or to the left, the more frequently an offensive skill player, specifically in open space, can get two-way goes on a defender as he reads and recognizes and ultimately detects the information about this defender's behaviors, it will open up more opportunities. And that, of course, is what he's trying to do. Openness and responsiveness to this landscape of opportunities or affordances. But this cat right here, 27, is coming in and is going to derail this a bit, right? So we see this deceleration in context here while Humphrey is still reading or perceiving the behavioral actions. Oops, I didn't want my arrow there. Sorry about that. I wanted that to be uh, this this right here, right? And I actually should have drawn that arrow the other way because you can see that this dude has decelerated in relation to Humphrey. So he has to stay highly adaptable in the moment. But again, guys and gals, we can set up practice activities, alive movement problems where this naturally emerges. So this player, I mean, and this one for this matter, or this other one, all parties involved would ultimately have more goes at getting more attuned and adaptable in relation to it. And he just works through novel movement actions in relation to the unfolding what is, the unfolding problem. And this type of thing, I can tell you from experience, will naturally and organically emerge for players if you set up these types of movement problems. Remember what I said before about repetition without repetition manipulating constraints. We might be able to change the width, and I want you to think about how that might constrain the space. Constrains the space that one could operate in, would also constrain the behaviors of all parties, the 1v2 in this situation. That constrained space changes the center of gravity, the base of support, the movement strategies that you might have available to you, the speeds that you're hitting, and what angles might be relevant also. But again, look at him while he's taking in information there, and he just moves from one party to the next, doesn't stay overly constrained himself where he's moving for movement's sake. His movement, his spinning action here is done in close relation to the what is in the problem. You can tell it wasn't contrived. You can tell it was highly adaptable and emergent in the moment. But again, look at the head here. We talk a lot about information detection through visual perception. What is a player looking at? When are they looking at it? And how might that feed into the way they act? Lil'Jordan Humphrey here doing his thing, always with that head on a swivel, always with his eyes back up to take in information. We can watch that from his head. So please do watch his head, take in information moment by moment. But again, we talk about deceleration in context. We talk about change of direction in context. That's the technique being applied in the context of this movement problem. This dude who, again, this video is all sorts of messed up because of how long it is. So I apologize for that. It was the best video I could find from the NFL. So 43 here, who, was engaged with Jerry Jeudy, number 10 down here. He is going to obviously, as we're about to find out from his movement behaviors, close this space and have to deal right here with Humphrey. But I want you to kind of see how Humphrey is moving from local movement problem to local movement problem. He might not actually see 43 until he is right in front of him. Like right about here, we probably see, or Humphrey probably sees 43 through his periphery. And it immediately, in a coupled fashion, perception flows into action, action flows into perception, vice versa, highly coupled. And we see that begin to change his movement behaviors, even though he was headed in this linear path. He throws this left foot down and yet again kind of hits his nifty little kind of basketball around the back type of crossover, right? But he uses the perceptual pickup where he doesn't get overly we don't see him get overly rushed. We also don't see him get panicked, which happens with guys oftentimes when they've had less exposure to these problems. Watch when he comes out of this movement problem, this local movement problem. He's looking while one guy has a hold of his left hip, or what appears to be his hand on his hip. He is always looking to the next source of information. Right here in Samuel coming from what would be left to right. And again, we see this perceptual pickup. He's probably recognizing and realizing interpersonal distance yet again. People will scoff at this and say, how can he possibly measure that in this short a period of time? I'm not saying he's measuring it like he's calculating it when he's solving these movement problems. He's utilizing the information pickup and detection about interpersonal distance. How close am I to that player? And within a moment's notice, how much does that interpersonal distance change? That will create the opportunity to act, right? Hopefully that makes some sense. And it's those information sources that we're trying to get players attuned to, sensitive to. But here, again, look at him look to find more information. Yet another movement problem. I apologize. We're just going to take it back just a little bit. Okay. When we come out of this, another movement problem. There's one, two converging guys, okay, in very tight or short spaces, 3 to 4 yards, a guy coming across your periphery and path from a different place in a different space. These types of 1v1 interactions, or 1v2 if we want to use this next dude as well. Think about how you can set alive movement problems where you changed initial conditions. So some of these interactions naturally play out. You're not trying to force them, you're not trying to recreate it or simulate it. You're trying to change the emergence of these problems. And that is what we can use here. But again, watch them come out of this, right? Another local movement problem that we can set up very frequently. Okay. I do this in tight space. Let me get stars out if I could. Okay. I do this oftentimes in tight space. We might have, I usually do that about um, to to 8-ish yards. Maybe we would go tighter if we wanted to. But here it would be this 1v1 type of interaction. One guy starting here at the line and another one moving from left to right. Usually they'd be starting outside of the space and moving from left to right, and then in the next rep, moving from right to left. Then we might actually have them meet and come down this tunnel in this short space as well, right? Hopefully that makes some sense. This offensive skill player, we could have him enter the space from any number of places. They could enter at the cone, or straight again down the tunnel. Change it up and change it up frequently. So these slices and snippets of the game are constantly changing. We never step in the same river twice. We're not the same man. The river isn't the same either. You guys have heard me say it over and over and over again. So an easy way to use this to inform our practice design is in a way that where we just give this player the intention, this greater global intention, where we say, don't get touched by the defender. And his aim then is to act in a way adaptively where he doesn't get touched. He's going to do whatever possible. Now, granted, um, Humphrey does get touched here, right? Not by 26 necessarily, but from behind. And so that is going to change ever so slightly. But with 26, we might be able to do something similar here from the 20 to 25 yard line. So we gave you one local movement problem at the beginning with that 1v2. We gave you a second one with these 1v1 interactions. And now we have another chaser with another defender. What am I talking about here? Another local movement problem. Offensive player entering a workspace. Let me draw the workspace for you guys, being that this is our last week. 25 yards and in, 20, 25 yards and in, maybe even 15 to a goal or line to gain. It wouldn't necessarily have to be the end zone as it is here. Changing in numbers to sideline. Okay. And with a chasing defender starting, normally we would have that chaser start 3 to 4 yards behind or so, but that depends on how many parties we have entering the space. So if we have a defender here, we have another defender entering the space, and usually we'd only have probably one blocker, whereas in this case, Humphrey has 3 blockers, so it's a 4v2 in the way that we see it right now. Usually we would have in our learning environment more like a 2v2 scenario kind of play out here. But again, I'm not saying one is right, wrong, or indifferent. Okay. And what we find here is now Humphrey has to be attuned and sensitive to at all times both moving parties. We probably won't have the tackle attempt in our learning environment because we just don't go to that point or place in most cases, right? Because we need to keep guys on their feet. And if they do go to the ground, they have to be able to safely control themselves. We don't want players getting injured out in our learning environment. But this type of thing where they can become sensitive to moving bodies, this chaos, this type of traffic, look at him continue to look from one problem to the next as he adapts accordingly, and he adapts accordingly with his actions in relation to the actions of others, the traffic on the ground, the litter that he's leaving or that he's seeing in front of him, and then hopping, skipping, jumping, bounding, changing speeds, cutting, angling, and the like, juking his way through the traffic. Lil'Jordan Humphrey right here shows us three different slices or snippets of the game that we can utilize to inform our own practice in learning environment design. And guys and gals, I cannot overstate this enough. This could be done as it goes from one video to the next. That could be done in any way you want to at any level: high school, college, professional, offensive, defensive. It can be working for intentional aims for position players across the field. Okay. Here today, we saw a wide receiver with a ball in his hands in space in these three local movement problems. It just could have easily been a tight end or a running back moving in similar ways. And also, we saw defensive backs pursuing him and wide receivers as his blockers. It could easily be any other number of positions. And those are the things that I really want you guys to think about when we look at our featured movement plays of the week every given week. If you didn't see any and all of the videos across the 17 weeks, I would highly implore you to go back and take a peek at it. You will probably see some themes, some threads that we can pull upon as we attempt to use the most skillful, the most adaptive, the most authentic, and ultimately the most dexterous movement behavior of the National Football League's most skillful players to inform our practice and learning environment design, and particularly the way that we set alive movement problems there. So, just like it has been over the last number of years, this has been another fun National Football League season campaign. If you enjoy the videos here at Football Beyond the Stats, hit subscribe, give me the thumbs up, give me a like, share it with your people, put comments in the section below. I've enjoyed going along this ride with you guys for another NFL season. I hope to see you guys again next year. Don't forget, in a week or two, to see the All Movement team, followed by the All Movement Awards, and ultimately culminating in my Mover of the Year for 2023. Thank you guys and gals for coming along for the ride, and I will talk to you again next time.